Mr. Cassidy,
Here.
Mr. Podak,
Here.
and myself, all members are present. I'd ask for the approval of the April 15th, 2025 minutes, please.
So moved. Second.
And on roll call, Mr. Cassidy. On roll call,
Yes.
Mr. Podak,
Yes.
and myself, yes. The minutes have been approved. Open issues, we'll start with Finance Director.
I don't have any open issues per se. I did want to address, I did send council I think the term was an 11th hour email. I like that. Regarding our IT services, with Buckeye IT terminating at the end of the month, we did partner with Seneca County and the city of Tiffin, did an RFQ on that to find a new service provider. The county and city of Tiffin are going in with a company out of Findlay. We have opted to work with Bascom. And I did send drafts of those agreements along with legislation that would authorize us to enter into agreements to do that. It's not on the agenda. I'll leave it to Finance Committee if they want to add it to the agenda or not. I will be coming to you in June with two appropriations. We received our invoices from OPWC for our July 1st payments on our outstanding debt. And if you go back into the financial recovery plan on page 63, you see all of our debt service. The very last one on there was an estimate because we had part of that project that hadn't closed out and was not being amortized yet. It's now being amortized. So it's $70,000 a year. So I'm going to be coming to you with an appropriation for additional spending of $70,000 in the sewer and the stormwater fund to accommodate that additional debt service for this year. The other appropriation will be to increase our IT service line item to reflect the fact that we're going to be sharing in the cost of a new IT support person to support police. We are sharing an IT person with the Seneca County and the city of Tiffin. The employee will be an employee of Seneca County, reporting to the sheriff with dotted lines to the commissioners. And the city of Fostoria and the city of Tiffin are going to share in the cost of that person because the software for 911 and the software for their recording of documentation, it's called the ProPhoenix server, is a shared server with those three entities. And this person will support that server and will share in that cost. The county picks up 50% of it and the city of Tiffin 25%, and our cost will be 25%. And that is a new role for all three entities, but one that's been much needed and may have been part of the reason our service provider decided not to continue to work with us, because it is a time consuming and it's very industry specific. So.
We can address the discussion about those contracts when we get to our portion of the meeting. Mayor Manel, do you have anything for the committee?
I really do not. The only thing I would add is that service agreement with Bascom Communications is very similar to the service agreement that we had with the previous provider.
Safety Service Director?
No, I have nothing.
Nothing this evening. Do you want to move on with the Red Tree presentation, or you prefer that council? Let's go ahead and with Red Tree.
However you would like to operate.
Let's go ahead and start with Red Tree, please.
Thank you. And good evening, everyone. My name is Ryan Nelson. I'm with Red Tree Investment Group. I have Joe Violan, who's part of the Red Tree family here, and we're here for our annual update to the Finance Committee. So thank you for having us here tonight. Provided some information here that will keep this short and sweet as we go through. I didn't know if there were any new members to the committee, so I wanted to give a little bit of background about Red Tree. We are a firm that focuses on investing public funds across Ohio. We manage a little over $9 billion and work with about 300 public entities. On page 2, for how we came to be here with the city of Fostoria. We began a partnership back in February of 2023, and we serve as an investment advisor for operating funds of the city and work with Steve on setting an investment allocation and strategy. Page 3 is permitted investments. These are the allowable investments of the city. The city has an investment policy that was updated in 2020. It follows the Ohio Revised Code 13514, and everything that you see there on the page would be the types of investments that Steve has at his disposal for investing the city's funds. All of it is centered around safety of principal, liquidity, and a market rate of return. On page 4, just real quick with an economic update, we could have 50 different slides here talking about the economy, and they're all going to tell the same story. There's a lot going on. Economic growth has been steady through 2024. It did turn negative for the first part of this year. A lot of that pointed towards what's going on with tariffs and the fact that there was a mass buy of foreign goods in the first half of the year to avoid higher prices. So we'll have to see what happens here in the second quarter, which will come out in later July. Jobs have remained steady, but there are some concerns with that. I'll touch on here quickly. Inflation has come down. I know it doesn't feel that way, but inflation has come down, so prices are not rising as fast as they could. There has been some news in the markets, if you paid attention to that Moody's did downgrade the United States Treasury debt. That has been a non-event in the markets. That was widely expected to happen. So it's not a major concern for us when investing the city's funds. Page 5, as it relates to the labor markets do remain somewhat robust. New jobs are being added in the markets. There was 177,000 new jobs added, and the unemployment rate remains low. All eyes are on what happens later this year as the market digests the federal layoffs. Most of those really will not take effect until September. So that is something that we need to be keeping an eye on about how the market digests that information. On page 6, as it relates to inflation, again, inflation has come down from the highs that we saw 2 years ago. Inflation is running at a year-over-year rate of 2.3%. And I know that doesn't feel that way when you're out shopping at times, that it feels like prices remain higher. Again, we are probably not going to go back to where prices were a few years ago, but they are not rising as fast as they were at one point in time. Again, all eyes are going to be on what happens to prices with potential tariffs and the long-standing policies there. One item we are following is on page 7, is who is actually spending money as they go out shopping. And there's a lot of literature written on who is spending money the most. So this chart here shows that the top 10% of income earners in the United States, they control 50% of spending. And that math does not start to work right. If you have the top 10% of our population spending 50%, that's who's out there purchasing matters. What happens when they stop spending? What happens when the stock market turns south like it did over the past year or a couple of months, and maybe they don't feel as wealthy and they're not out spending as quickly? So this is a concern that there's a small percentage of our population controlling a larger percentage of consumer spending. So something that we need to be mindful of when we're looking at consumer spending. Interest rates have also seen quite a bit of volatility over the past couple of months, just like the stock market. Here we're focused on the 2-year Treasury, which is the second line of bar charts there. At the end of January, the 2-year Treasury was well over 4%. At the end of April, it had fallen down to 3.6%. Now it's back to 4%. The reason I point this out is if you just focus on your money market rates, Steve, like at Star Ohio or at Premier, you don't see that wild volatility because those rates don't change in the market. Those are really controlled by the Federal Reserve. And speaking of the Federal Reserve, right now, at least as of when we left the office this morning, the Federal Reserve is anticipated to lower interest rates at least 2 times here in 2025. That is data dependent, obviously, but right now, that is where the market is anticipating interest rates to be. So, Steve, that would put your bank account rates below 4% by the end of the year, if that all plays out throughout the year. Looking ahead for investing funds, there's a lot going on. We're anticipating more volatility with interest rates. we need to follow the messaging from the Fed. Consumer confidence is on shaky footing with just the change in policies and the markets, et cetera, et cetera. We talked about labor and inflation. The real estate markets have certainly seen their own degree of pain as well with higher mortgage rates. And then lastly, but we have on here the geopolitical risk remain, and we can have 100 of those, but certainly a lot of it focused on as trade is reshaped. On page 10 is an overview of the city funds. Steve provided the information for the Premier bank accounts in Star, Ohio at the end of April, and the Red Tree investment account. And in total, the funds is a little over $17 million. Overall, all the funds are yielding over a 4.5%, and this is picture perfect. I will not curse here, but it looks pretty darn good is what I have here for the city's investments. If you looked at the rates there on the previous charts, the 2-year treasury is around 4%, and you're earning 4.5% on your funds. And it's well diversified across different types of investments. One thing I did talk to Steve about is potentially reallocating some funds. Right now, the split between fixed income securities and cash is 43% to 57%. Generally, we like to see that at least about a 50-50 kind of split between fixed income investments and cash. So there could be a potential reallocation out of the STAR money and the Premier Money Market Fund to investments. So something that we could work on here, Steve, in the coming months in order to kind of just rebalance that approach for the city's funds. The page 11 gives a little better snapshot on the portfolio statistics. If we're just focused on the fixed income piece of the funds, that portion is just a little over 7.6 million, earning a little over 4.5%. What is important to note about the portfolio is how it's invested. The weighted average maturity of the portfolio is over 2 years. And why is that important? That means we've locked higher interest rates in over the past year and a half when interest rates were at over 4 and 5%. You see there on the bottom part on the maturity distribution, over 40% of these funds, or almost 40% of these funds, are maturing in 3+ years. So the city is well positioned to enjoy those higher interest rates in the coming years. So this is the point where, again, I do think it would be beneficial to just reallocate a portion of some of the cash into fixed income securities. Questions on that from committee?
Stated another way, in talking with Ryan, the thing we should consider is taking roughly $1 million from our Premier money market account, investing it out of short term back into the Red Tree investment portfolio and get some longer locked in rate on that, especially in light of the fact the Fed Reserve is anticipating dropping those short term rates in the next few months, possibly. It's a guessing game. Nobody knows for sure.
It is a guessing game. If I could certainly have the crystal ball to tell you that, I would, but it all comes down to a proper asset allocation and where you're weighted. So if you're making a 50%, allocation towards fixed income versus cash. And I know we've talked about that here before in the committee. What is the right mix with that? The city is in a much better financial position from when I've even first started here in 2023 to have the comfort level to even say that here tonight. As it relates to investing those funds, we would be investing those funds somewhere in the 4 to 4.25% type percent of rates. Is that where we would be in today's markets? Any other thoughts on that?
I would just add that I think it's particularly timely to look at that because Premier has been very aggressive in that money market rate. And as we all know, that they are no longer Premier. So there could be a change in philosophy there as far as being that aggressive with the money market fund.
Yeah, and along the lines of banking, we are going to be putting our banking relationship out for proposal. We should be doing it every 5 years. I'm not sure the last time it was done, but I'm hoping to have that out and back from the market by mid-June, and if we make a change, it'd be July. So,
Any other questions tonight?
thank you, Ryan.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. We'll turn this over to the committee members then. I guess maybe the first thing we should address is what our desire is to do with those two 11th hour items. Would we want to request those to go on tonight's agenda? Mr. Cassidy, I see you nodding your head. You would like to see this?
I think we need to.
IT support's pretty,
I'm somewhat surprised, I'm delighted really, that the issues that we faced a few months ago when Buckeye decided to essentially drop us, Tiffin, I thought it might be a much longer process to find a good fit. And I know that it will get spanked for not being transparent and another emergency ordinance, but there's two kinds of speeds in this world. One is the speed of business and one is the speed of government. And this is a situation where we've got the components put together, and I think we need to move forward. This is a very serious matter. And I think a sense of urgency on getting this legislation put in tonight is very important. And it's not to say that I mean, I do a lot of soul searching about this. And when I sat on the other side of the railing years ago, it used to make me madder than hell because every time you turned around, they were making motions for emergency legislation. But when you sit over here and you say, take a look at the big picture, there's some things that you have to establish a priority on and move forward. If we take the route of dragging our feet on this for a couple more meetings, we're setting the clock back further and further. So I highly advocate we move forward.
Care to
All right.
add anything?
just, if you don't, in this day and age, if your IT's not working and you don't have a contract for somebody to fix it, you're in big trouble.
Yeah.
So I would reiterate a little bit what Councilman Cassidy said. I'm not, and I've said it before and I'll say it again. It'd be nice if everything had 3 readings, but it don't work that way in government. I asked somebody when I was elected to this job how government works, and they said slow. And I said, really? And they said, well, actually not. It works really slow. And then they said, well, really, it works slower than slow. Sometimes it's so much back and forth. So I understand it now. I didn't used to understand it quite as well. And realistically, that's why we have people hired to go through this information to make the best decisions and bring it to us in a timely manner, which I'm like Greg, I'm surprised we're here already. And it's even better, I think, that we're doing it local. Bascom's about as local as you can get to Fostoria, so.
Okay, I don't think that we need a motion to, one of us will just need to make the recommendation that we want to add, unless somebody disagrees with me, I don't think we
Add to
need
the
a
agenda.
committee, to add those 2 legislative items to the agenda. Whether they pass the 3 reading rule will be left to council. I would like to add just a couple things. I did have an opportunity to review these items, although not in the depth that I would like to. But I did hit the highlights, and financially, there's a savings to moving the support over to Bascom, and that would be a savings of $7,200 a year. The IT portion, the IT technician, is an additional cost. I believe it was $18,134. So realistically, we would be looking at an increased overall cost of around $11,000, just rounding. but we're getting an additional service for that. So for those of you who didn't have the opportunity to review that, I just wanted to be able to give you that brief summation of that. I did look over the contract for the IT technician, and I'm glad to see there's an opt-out with a 180-day notice, which seems reasonable under the circumstances. It's a half a year. I just would like to see something in writing. I guess we can see how it goes, but I'd like to make sure that we have the opportunity to evaluate that person, and that's not in that agreement. It's not really a huge deal, but if you could make that notation, and my personal opinion is we should make sure that we have a seat at the table when we evaluate that individual. Anything else from either committee member? No, with that, I would ask, okay.
I guess I want to just go and make myself perfectly clear. Everybody's got a right to an opinion. I don't want the way I presented the movement of this legislation to exhibit or give the impression of carelessness at all. But I can't stress enough the sense of urgency that we have to do the right things for this community. And so I'm willing to do that because I put Fostoria ahead of anything else when it comes to this kind of stuff. That's all I want. I just want to make perfectly clear.
Okay, anything else from committee members? Okay, at this time we'll open the floor to anyone from the public that wishes to speak on a finance committee item.
Good evening, Jill Filliater, 402 West Culbertson. And I agree in principle what you're talking about. My concern is about the emergency read. Obviously, there was a time frame where we were made aware, government was made aware, that the Buckeye was coming out. Not once in any of the meetings that I recall watching was it discussed that we have to be starting to look. So what has obviously been at least a 60-day, I would think you'd had a minimum of 60 for the person to back out. Usually it's longer than that when you have a contract with an IT company. So you knew at least 2 months ahead of time. So I would think with transparency, this is my only concern, is that you would have mentioned that this is what's going to be happening, and we're going to be looking at trying to get bids so that there is that transparency. We might not have been able to do a 3-reading rule, but you would have been able to share with us 2 months ago that they're bailing out on us and we're going to have to go with something else. Similarly, the $70,000 assessment money that's going to have to come out for this decree money, we've known about that. And we've known about that. It's going to be a yearly thing. But yet I'm hearing today that it might have to come as an emergency read because the transparency wasn't there. We know that we might have to be paying fees for this decree. It makes rational sense as the council to be transparent and saying, guys, it's coming up. You would be able to say the 3-reading rule because you've known about it for a long time. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you've all known about it. It's an annual thing that you're going to have to do. But yet today I'm hearing that you're going to have to put it in as a potential emergency read because the deadline's coming. And you all knew it was there. That's what I'm concerned about. I'm concerned the fact that you're not being transparent. You had this great opportunity. Oh yeah, I'm all for jumping on it and avoid the 3-reading rule. But you knew ahead of time and you're not being transparent with the people. That's the only thing I have a concern about. Thank
Do
you.
you want to speak to that or you prefer I do?
A couple of things. Council was made aware in February when we were made aware that we needed a new IT provider. Council was made aware that we were going with the county and the city of Tiffin in an RFQ process so that we could get bids, sealed bids. And we were going along the path that we were either going to go with the city of Tiffin and the county, or we were going to do our own. So that's all been out there. The process ended up being the bids came back mid-April. We interviewed, all 3 entities interviewed potential candidates in mid-April. Decisions were made at the beginning of May, and that's when we started to work on agreements at the beginning of May. So everybody in council, I hope I didn't blindside anybody at council of what we were doing. The $70,000 is a principal payment on debt. Nobody was aware of how much that was going to be until OWPC actually started to amortize that loan. And that's why in the fiscal recovery plan, it was noted as an estimate. Those invoices came out May 12th. Now we know that our amortization is going to change. We're going to need to appropriate more for debt service now that that additional loan's appropriating or is amortizing. So it is very transparent. Now, could I rush and get them more legislation for another 70,000? Got to stop the madness at some point. It's coming. They know it's coming. And it's not in the plan only because OPWC hadn't amortized that. So it's not a surprise. It's not something we knew back in January and we should have done now. We found out in May. We're doing it now. The challenge with a lot of business transactions, they don't work on 6-week cycles like the legislative process does. And that is the challenge that we get. There's very few things that operate on a 6-week cycle. It's usually you get an invoice today, you pay it before 30 days. So we don't have, there's a lot of things that happen that we can't, and I appreciate the legislative process and the need for 3 readings, and we do what we can to stay ahead of it, but it's my biggest challenge on the business side. Legislatively, I can't speak to, I won't speak to because that's out of my area.
Right. And I understand what you're saying. What you're saying is council has been definitely made aware of the issues of
And
the-
public, and public session.
And so
in public session.
in public session about
Yes.
the IT was made
Yes,
aware?
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you go back to the February,
I'll
go
look,
back
'cause
to
I didn't
February
see it.
YouTube meetings.
Okay.
You'll see it.
So, and the other thing I would share, Jill, and I only share this because, you know, as a former school treasurer,
Yes.
I had a little learning curve myself. So this all focuses around the appropriation process. And it would not be uncommon for me to take something to my board as a school treasurer and need to change the appropriations so that I could take action that week. We don't have that luxury here because we've got to go through the 3 reading rule. It is very difficult on financial matters to operate and not run into, well, some things are priced out, and if you delay too long, the price no longer exists. He's got to get a purchase order in place to make the purchase. In this case, he's got to make the payment.
Right.
And that 3 reading rule alongside the appropriation process becomes very difficult.
Well, yeah.
So that's why you see financial related items frequently, you know, they are done on a waiving the
Right.
3 reading rule.
And I appreciate that. I'm just,
Yeah.
I was concerned.
I felt the same way when
Because we're one of the highest ones in the whole state for the ones that are doing the emergency reads. And for such a small city, I'm really surprised that we're one of the highest ones for these emergency reads. That was my only concern, but I do totally
I'm going to
understand.
guess that some of that has to do being under state
Well, and Jill, the only
oversight.
thing I would say to that is there's a lot of legislation written to pass on an emergency basis, which is different than suspending a 3 reading rule. We do things on an emergency basis, which means we don't have to wait 30 days after council is active.
Correct.
So I don't know where you track the information in terms of emergency basis versus 3 reading rule. So let's just be clear, or is it the 3 reading rule or is it the emergency basis?
It's a give and take because when you do the 3 reading rule and suspend a 3 reading rule, it automatically then goes to the 30-day draw out. And so we do a lot of the.
A lot of legislation is written on an emergency basis, and if you look back to the last few minutes, most things were passed on an emergency basis, but still had a 3 reading rule. There are legislation, and most of the legislation that I bring to council is passed suspending the 3 reading rule and passed on an emergency basis so that I don't have to wait 30 days to issue a purchase order, so I can do it the next day. If you go back and look at our zoning changes for lawns, we raised lowered that was not passed on an emergency basis because citizens then had 30 days notice that was going to go into effect after we read the 3 readings. But there are other things. We do 3 readings, and it's still passed on an emergency meeting. As soon as council passed it, we can act upon it. So that,
Yeah, I know, I mean,
I
yeah,
just don't want the public to think that we're suspending the 3 reading rule and everything when we really are not. And I think council's done a much better job
much better job than
this
last
year
year, yes.
going for 3 readings. And I think if you go back and start to track those numbers, you'll see
Yeah,
that.
I tracked them the
So
year
I
before.
just want to make
Yeah.
sure
And they
council's not
have,
being,
no, they have done a much better job than the year before. The year before, they were at like 80%. So they've done a much better job. I have that data, but yes, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Just one comment on that. It's not really the council can only deal with what information is given to us. And a lot of times, because we're under fiscal emergency, some of this stuff comes down from the state at the last minute that we have to run through that way. As well as, I know that there's a big calendar in the administrative office that's projected out things that have to be done up to 6 months ahead of time. And it's much different and it's being used well compared to it was a year ago. So, yeah, there is going to be emergencies. I don't care. If you think, no, never mind. I'm not going to say that. But thank you for getting the information to us on a timely basis so we can deal with it. We're not always thrilled that we have to do an emergency, but at the same time, you can't just shut down the city. You can't pay that, stop and not pay that allocation that's due. We can't be without IT. So there's going to be suspension of the 3 reading rule from time to time.
Anyone else from the public care to speak? Please. If you could stand and. Oh, okay. All right. All right. In that case, I'd ask for a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second,
And on roll call, Mr. Podak,
Yes.
Mr. Cassidy.
yes.
And myself, we are adjourned at 6:07.
601.